Alrighty, and we're live. Hopefully everything sounds good on the audio side of things. So today I'm going to be covering a biblical study of the parallels between the Norse end times of Ragnarok and the biblical end times of Revelation. And as people are flowing in here, I'll go ahead and give this a second to warm up. How's everyone doing? Does the audio sound good? I just want to make sure everyone can hear me just fine. Let's see here. Okay. Alrighty. Well, alright. So I'm going to go and get into this then. Whoever doesn't make it can go ahead and just watch the replay. So, first things first. I've been studying polytheistic pantheons for quite some time now. And when studying the Norse mythology and Norse end times, because really, between polytheistic pantheons, the Norse are really the only ones that have a glorified end times, such as Ragnarok. And it's interesting because the Norse pantheon and belief set is, quite frankly, the youngest out of all of them when you're, putting them together against the Sumerian, Egyptian, or the Greek and Hindu. So it shouldn't really come to a surprise that the Norse Ragnarok legend would have so many biblical parallels, considering the fact that that Ragnarok was estimated to have been written, or at least orally passed down, in about the 6th century. So you're looking at least 500 years of history between the writing of Revelation, which took place in 95 AD on the Isle of Patmos, and the beginnings or origins of Ragnarok. So that being said, outside of Ragnarok, I've actually found a lot of amazing parallels between the traditions and the beliefs of the Norse, and a lot of biblical parallels and how it lines up. But we're going to go and jump into it. So what I'm doing right now is that I've highlighted certain key events that take place in Ragnarok, and I'm going to go and read through those with you and break them down, the symbolism through my studies and how they really break down, and then we're going to go and compare them to the Bible verses that parallel with those. So, the beginning of our Norse Ragnarok story. The wolves, Skoll and Hati, who have hunted the sun and the moon through the sky since the beginning of time, will at last catch their prey. So, first things first. Skoll and Hati, they're portrayed as wolves, obviously, as I just read, but they're actually representations of doomsday clocks, or a certain appointed time for the sun and the moon. The wolves are going to essentially catch their prey, right, and begin to devour them. This is going to result, in other words, there's an appointed time where the sun and the moon are going to begin to be devoured in a way. In other words, they're going to gradually lose their light and their ability to give light. So keep that in mind, because when we get to the Bible verses, you're going to see that there's a couple distinguishable phases of the sun and the moon being darkened in the Bible. But carrying on, through the next set of Ragnarok, the stars too will disappear, leaving nothing but a black void in the heavens. The Yggdrasil, hold on one second, I think I just got, dang, good to go. How's the audio sound, Jason? Are we all good? I just want to make sure everyone can hear just fine. I'll go ahead and just continue here as you guys begin to flow in. So, anyways, we'll go ahead and pick up right back here at this event. So the stars too would disappear, leaving nothing but a black void in the heavens. The Yggdrasil, the great tree that holds the cosmos together, will tremble, and all trees and even the mountains will fall to the ground. So in my research, I have found that the Yggdrasil, the world tree, or the tree that holds together all reality, symbolically represents three aspects. The first aspect is mass-connected consciousness, in which there is a heavenly and an underworldly stream. The heavenly coming from the elemental realm of Muspelheim, which is a realm of fire, which is beyond the dome, according to the Norse cosmology. And then, of course, the stream of underworldly consciousness, which is the realm of Niflheim, the elemental realm of ice. So, the second thing, or the second aspect that the Yggdrasil also represents is multidimensional reality, because the whole idea behind the Yggdrasil is that it is a bridge that connects all 9 realms of Norse mythology together. You know, you have Muspelheim, Niflheim, Helheim, Jotunheim, Svartalheim, Alfheim, Nidavellir. You have basically 9 realms. So it's symbolically representing multidimensional reality, that there are realms within Midgard, which is the earth, the plane that we live on right now. The third aspect that the Yggdrasil represents is a foundational support pillar of the dome, which the Norse believed, the sky was a dome, and that it was portrayed as the skull of Ymir, according to their creation narrative. So, in this specific context of what I had just read of this event in Ragnarok, it is the foundational support aspect of the Yggdrasil. Now, the great trembles also result in a displacement of the islands and mountains and causing tsunamis, as we also see here in this event of Ragnarok. Jormungand, the mighty serpent who dwells at the bottom of the sea and encircles the land, will rise from the depths, spilling the seas over, as he makes the earth landfall. So Jormungand also represents 3 aspects, symbolically and literally. The great sea serpent, which also parallels to the Bible with the story of the Leviathan as told in Job chapter 41. It also represents the bounds that encompasses the earth, where the waters prevaileth not, also known as Alfheim or Antarctica as what we call it, right? Because you got to remember, for a lot of you that aren't hip to the geocentric Earth model, essentially you have a bound of land that encompasses the entirety of the Earth, keeping the waters in. Okay, that's also what the Norse believed. It is in my research that I have found that this land that encompasses the Earth, which is symbolically represented by Jormungand, is also the land of Alfheim, and I might be able to get to that at the end of this stream. It wasn't really too important to the aspect of the parallels of Revelation, but if we have time, I'll go over that. And number 3, it also represents the end to the reign of the gods and the destruction of those that worship them. Because Jormungand, in Norse mythology, he is the one that kills Thor. Him and Thor battle it out. Thor does win, but takes 9 steps after his battle and falls to the ground as he has been covered in poison by the great world serpent. So, what we see in this event, right? Let's go and recap everything I've gone over so far. According to the events in Ragnarok, the sun and the moon are going to be caught and begin to be devoured, which is, in other words, they're going to lose their light and begin to go dark. The foundations of the firmament, as represented by Jormungand, who is symbolic of the bounds that encompass the earth, as well as the Yggdrasil, will be shaken. This results into the mountains falling to the ground, islands being displaced, tsunamis, and also the falling of the stars. Okay? Very interesting. So keep that in mind. Now we're going to go and get into the Bible verses that parallel with these aspects of Ragnarok. In Revelation chapter 6, verses 12 through 14, "And I beheld when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of the heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it's rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places." Continuing that in Revelation chapter 8, verse 12. "And the 4th angel sounded, and the 3rd part of the sun was smitten, and the 3rd part of the moon, and the 3rd part of the stars, so as the 3rd part of them was darkened. and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. Interesting. I'm sure some of you are beginning to see where this is going here. In Revelation chapter 11, verse 13, in the same hour there was a great earthquake, and a tenth part of the city fell, and in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted, and and gave glory to the God of the heaven. Revelation chapter 16, verses 18 through 21. And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as one not since men were upon the earth. So mighty an earthquake and so great. And this great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and the Babylon came in remembrance before God to give unto her cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. And there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent. And men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, for the plague thereof was exceeding great. So, to go ahead and recap a little bit here, we kind of see that, so in the Ragnarok narrative, all these events seem to be taking place all at the same time, whereas in Revelation, it's, seals and then trumpets and then vials type of stuff. We see it in the breaking of the seals. Some of these events are going on. Similar events are going on in the blowing of the trumpets, and then also similar events are happening during the wrath of God. So it's all kind of tying in together here, and it's pretty interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and continue reading. Everyone gets it at this point. Sun and the moon are going to be going dark, and in the Bible, as I've read in the during the sounding of the fourth angel, the fourth trumpet, that's when the sun is smitten. Because as we see here, when in the sixth seal, when the six seals broke and the sun and the moon go dark, they go dark. But then in Revelation 8:12, at the sound of a trumpet, it's smitten. So there's different phases of the sun and the moon going dark, which is basically what the Ragnarok narrative is saying. Because once they're caught by the wolf skull and Hati, they're being devoured. So they're gradually losing their ability to give light. And we see that as displayed in Revelation. So I'm going to go ahead. I got a whole bunch of verses here. I kind of went overkill on it. Everyone kind of gets the point. Sun and the moon going dark. Stars are going to fall. Crazy stuff. So the next aspect of Ragnarok begins here. There will come a great winter, unlike any other the world has yet seen. The biting winds will blow snows from all directions, and the warmth of the sun will fail, plunging the earth into unprecedented cold. This winter shall last for the length of 3 normal winters, with no summers in between. Mankind will become so desperate for food and other necessities of life that all laws and morals will fall away, leaving only the bare struggle for survival. It will be an age of swords and axes. Brother will slay brother, father will slay son, and son will slay father. Some of you that are extreme biblical literates will already recognize where I'm going with this. The first thing I'm going to point out about this aspect of Ragnarok is that the winter it talks about doesn't necessarily mean a snowy winter. It could. The Bible doesn't really lay out anything about a great winter that comes, but a great winter could be the result of the sun and the moon going dark. That could be a direct cause and effect relationship. Even though the Bible doesn't directly say that, it could happen. But like I said, with the Ragnarok story, it doesn't necessarily mean that the winter is literal, because you got to remember, with the northern Germanic people that believed in this polytheism, a winter was just a sign of hard times, a time where you had to be strong to survive, right? And this is going to come out and basically wipe the slate of those who are not prepared, those who are not strong. You're going to die during the winter. So it doesn't necessarily mean that's a literal winter, but a metaphor for a very difficult time. And as we saw here, brother will slay brother, father will slay son, son and father, stuff like that. Well, let's go ahead and read in Revelation chapter 6, verses 2 through 8. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he sat on him, and had a bow, and a crown was given unto him. And he went forth conquering and to conquer. And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, Come and see. And there went out another horse was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another, and that there was given unto him a great sword. And when he had opened the third seal, I heard a beast saying, Come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse. And he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand, and I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. And and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast come and say, come and see. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name was given unto him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth to kill with the sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. So as you can see already immediately that this is paralleling to the aspect of Ragnarok. I'll go and just check in here on the live stream just to make sure everything's good. All right, cool. So Matthew, again, the same exact message is relayed in Matthew. In Matthew chapter 10, brother shall deliver brother up to death, father the child, and the children shall rise up against their parents and cause them to be put to death. We also see that in Matthew 24 as well. Ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye not be troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So we got those parallels out of the way. The next one, Jormungand will spit his venom all over the world, poisoning land, water, and air alike. Well, that parallels right here in Revelation chapter 8, verses 10 through 11. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from the heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of the waters. And the name of the star was called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. Now, there's a lot of, different interpretations to what wormwood really is. I've heard just about all of them. That it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's a literal poison, but it is something that comes to poison the waters, or which could be interpreted as men. But nonetheless, that obviously parallels. Okay, Jormungand will poison the waters all over the earth, and men are going to die from it. Or wormwood is going to come crashing down, as the Bible says. So the next step of Ragnarok, the dome of the sky will be split, and from the crack shall emerge the fire giants from Muspelheim. So this is what I have come to find in my studies of Norse mythology concerning Muspelheim. The realm Muspelheim is a primordial realm of fire, which is, in my opinion, representing heaven, the heaven beyond the dome, right? So we see that as, the reason why I think it parallels is because it's obvious that God is described as a God of fire, as we see in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 29, for our God is a consuming fire. Or in Exodus chapter 13, verse 21, and the Lord went before him by day in a pillar of a cloud, and to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire, to give them light to go by day and night. You see that reiterated in Exodus 19:18, when he comes down on the Mount Sinai, and was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof descended as the smoke of the furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. So I've got a whole bunch of list of verses. Like I said, I went overkill. I know a lot of you already see it, but not only is God represented as a consuming fire, or a God of fire, but there's also a lot of fire being seen in the heavens as well. Not just God himself. We see that in Revelation chapter 4, verse 5. And out of the throne proceeded lightnings and thunderings and voices, and there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. In Revelation 15, verse 2, and I saw as it were a sea of glass mingled with fire, and them that had gotten the victory over the beast, and over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass, having the harps of God. So, the other aspect of this that parallels with the Bible is that the giants of Muspelheim are representations of the angels of God. Some giants, like the legendary giant, fire giant Surt, from Muspelheim, even carries a flaming sword, which in Genesis chapter 3, verse 24, we see that when God chases Adam, puts Adam and Eve out of Eden, and stations cherubims and a flaming sword. So cherubims and a flaming sword are seen together. Now, I'm going to go ahead and check back on Wormwood. Yeah, okay. Everything's good. Just want to check back on the live stream. So, we'll go and get back. So, this is the next aspect of Ragnarok that parallels with Revelation. Their leader shall be Surt, with a flaming sword brighter than the sun in his hand, as they march across the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge to Asgard, the home of the gods. The bridge will break and fall behind them. An ominous horn will ring out. This will be Heimdall, the divine sentry, blowing the Gjallarhorn to announce the to announce the arrival of the moment the gods have feared. The gods will decide to go to battle, even though they know what the prophecies have foretold concerning the outcome of this clash. They will arm themselves and meet their enemies on a battlefield called Vigrid, which in Old Norse means a plain where battle surges. And again, a lot of you who are biblically literate and have read much of the Bible just saw a lot of parallels just right there in that aspect. And we're going to go and cover that. So, in Ragnarok, the fire giants of Muspelheim are also tasked with the burning of the world with fire. Similar tasks have also been given to the angels of God. Then the Battle of Armageddon takes place in the Valley of Megiddo, as we also see in the Bible. We'll cover that in a second. A valley so large that even Napoleon said every army in the world could fight there at the same time. So, let's go and get into that. So, in Revelation chapter 8, verses 5 through 9, and the angel, before I do that, so this whole battle between the Aesir gods and the fire giants of Muspelheim, this is the war of Armageddon that takes place in the Bible. And the fact that they even mention that it takes place in a great valley, like the Valley of Megiddo, it's outstanding. So, Revelation 8, chapter 8, verses 5 through 9. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. And the seven angels which had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood. And they were cast upon the earth, and the third part of the trees were burnt up, and all grass was burnt up. And the second angel sounded, as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. And the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. So we're seeing right here in this passage that the angels of God are essentially raining fire down upon the earth, destroying it and burning it up with fire. Very similar to how the giants of Muspelheim are going to burn the earth according to Ragnarok. So now this picks up in Revelation chapter 16, verses 8 through 21. And the fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun, and power was given unto him to scorch men with fire. And men were scorched with great heat, and blasphemed the name of God, which hath power over these plagues, and they repented not to give him glory. And the fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, and his kingdom was full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues for pain, and blasphemed the God of heaven because of their pains and their sores, and repented not of their deeds. And the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and unto the whole world to gather them to battle of the great day of God Almighty. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk away, and they see his shame. And he gathered them together into the place he called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. So this is the battle in Norse mythology, what they call the battle of the gods on the plain of Vigrid. We see that right here, the battle of Armageddon, where all the armies of the opposition, the satanic opposition versus the armies of God. And obviously, armies of God wipe them out. And we also see that in Ragnarok. So, the very last segment. Now, essentially, when this battle takes place between the gods and the fire giants of Muspelheim, all the gods die. It is only very fragmented beliefs of the Northern Germanics that any of the gods even survive. There's nothing really down in writing. Daniel McCoy, who is the researcher that does a lot of this, I think he's a phenomenal researcher because he doesn't really stick to, let's say, customs, like normal. I'm having a hard time trying to find the word to describe it, but he takes an honest view of the Norse mythology. You know, let me see here. Yeah, Jason. So the Norse reverse the good guys and the bad guys to keep the adherents on the side of the yeah. So that's exactly what happened. So because like the Norse, regardless of the fact that the Norse believed that all their gods were going to die, that they're really not immortal and they're not all powerful, that indeed one day their reckoning will come and they're all going to be destroyed. So it is, like I said, the Norse mythology, even though that it parallels a lot with Revelation, they're still on the side of the Antichrist. They're still on the side of the satanic system. So it's just funny to me that the Norse believed so heavily in the Aesir gods and how powerful they were, and yet they were obviously influenced by the Book of Revelation. Like I said earlier in the stream, Book of Revelation, written 500 years before Ragnarok was even a thought, and yet the prophecies of the great and fearful day of the Lord prevailed to the point to which even the heathen that worship these satanic representations even admit that their gods are going to die one day, that they're not all powerful. After Ragnarok, like I said, it's not necessarily in writing. It's more of just like customary beliefs of the northern Germanic people that there will be a new heaven, a new earth, a new heaven, that will be created after everything descends into chaos, all the gods die, the world is destroyed. There's going to be a new one, right? Which again correlates exactly with what the Bible says as well. So like these beliefs, these customary beliefs about what will happen after Ragnarok is that there's going to be this new earth in which there's going to be a new almighty leader that presides over the entire earth, and everything is going to be perfection. There won't be pain and suffering. So they're basically kind of ripping off Revelation. When I was reading and studying Norse mythology and Ragnarok, the only thing I could really take away from it was that, wow, these guys bootlegged Revelation in a term. But yeah, to answer your question, it almost seems like that they essentially make the bad guys the good guys and the good guys the bad guys, which is exactly what you just said. I'm just repeating myself here. But yeah, which is weird to me because in the Norse creation mythology, Muspelheim has always been there. Same thing with Niflheim. And that's another parallel too that I'll bring up. So Muspelheim and Niflheim, I'm sorry, there's three aspects to the creation myth of the Norse. And it's funny to me because I've noticed this throughout all polytheistic pantheons is that the origin of the cosmos, the origin of reality, starts with three parts. I would agree. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But in the Norse, it was Muspelheim, Niflheim, and the Ginnungagap, which was just the Great Void. So you had a place of elemental fire, which again, obviously represents God. He is a consuming fire. And then they just had a polar opposite to represent everything that wasn't God, which is Niflheim, the elemental place of ice. And then you had the Great Void, which is what the Norse basically just called space, the area in which matter can exist, plain out. So yeah, very interesting points on that. So we got, all right, cool. Let me ask you guys something. I got some other stuff to work on. Is there any other questions of the stuff that I just went over? Because I do have some other parallels I'd like to bring up. It kind of has something to do with how we kind of view Genesis, because it ties into the Yggdrasil and essentially the first sin and how that affected humanity. If you guys have time, you guys want me to go over that, I can go over that. It's pretty good stuff. It's a heavy read, but it's interesting. So I actually went through all that information pretty quickly. Like I said, it seems like everyone in here I already know, and They already know about Nephilim and all that stuff, so I don't have to catch anyone up to speed on that part. So if there's not going to be any questions here, I'm going to go ahead and get to the creation parallels of the Norse mythology. Let me go and pull that up here. So, okay. You see, make it happen, Captain. All right, cool. I'm going to make it happen. So, I'm going to start reading here out of my notes that I took down. So, this is what I have written down on my study of connected consciousness, the Garden of Eden, and the original sin. So, in the mythology of the ancient northern Germanic tribes, it was believed that the Norns were keepers of fate, and they were feared because of it. Like the Aesir, Vanir, all the other gods, the elves, they all feared these Norns, right? These keepers of fate. Another quick side step. What I like about Norse mythology is that they really do just admit that all these beings that are non-human or they're human hybrids, they're all related. Like in Norse mythology, you can't even really tell the difference between what they called the light elves and the Aesir and Vanir gods. As a matter of fact, the Vanir god Freyr is the king of the light elves. But there's not really that much difference between all these different mythical beings. Like they're just all kind of classified as brothers and sisters of one another, which makes sense because when you study the mythology, they all came from one being together. So it's just, Anyways, so the Norns were keeper of fate. However, the Norns did not control fate, but rather knew the outcome, because fate itself is nothing more than the result of decisions made by the conscious individual. That means that these Norns would have had to have had access to the stream of all conscious beings according to the logical application of said beliefs. This application was nothing more than theory and speculation until the dwelling place of the Norns was revealed to me. In my research, of course. The Norns lived beneath the Yggdrasil, which, as I explained earlier in the stream, the Yggdrasil is the mighty tree whose trunk rises at the geographical center of Norse cosmology. The Yggdrasil is rooted in the farthest depths of the underworld, which is known as Niflheim, the elemental land of ice, and its heights go beyond the firmament, or the dome, the skull of Ymir, into the heaven, or the elemental realm of fire called Muspelheim. And then, of course, it connected the other seven realms in between. Because of this, the well-being of the cosmos depends on the well-being of the Yggdrasil, which, again, it's more symbolic representation than anything. I believe the Yggdrasil was a very literal representation in the Garden of Eden. I think that's just plain out and simple. Really easy to see that connection. When the tree trembles, it signals the arrival of Ragnarok, the destruction of the universe. The Yggdrasil is a symbolic representation of connected consciousness as well as multidimensional existence, and even a foundational support aspect of the firmament or the skull of Ymir. So the legend continues to describe the Yggdrasil as being gnawed upon by spiritual beasts such as stags, dragons, serpents, eagles, and even squirrels. This detail would be a symbolic representation of the second law of thermodynamics, obviously, which, my whole thought process behind the second law of thermodynamics is that it's very biblical. Because the second law basically states as long as time is continuing to move forward, chaos is growing and growing and growing. Therefore, if you were to go back in time, chaos became less and less and less until you get to a point of where chaos did not exist. There had to have been a focal point in which chaos was introduced into the world. The Bible says that plain out. When Adam and Eve took of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, there's our starting point of chaos that affected the entire realm of reality. So, obviously, This detail is also this detail, as I described, these spiritual animals gnawing on the tree, is the consequences of the original sin. Um, let's see here. So, like I said before, I think this Yggdrasil also represented the tree in the Garden of Eden. I think that at least that's where the idea of the Yggdrasil even came from, was the tree of life or the tree of death in this in this instance. So, what we do know is that the indulgence of the fruit thereof from the tree in the Garden of Eden affected the conscious thought and preordained knowledge of mankind. That being said, I believe that the legend of the Yggdrasil sheds light upon the eating of the fruit and how it could have affected us. Since the Yggdrasil was rooted in the darkest depths of the underworld, but also extended into the realm beyond the firmament, it displays that there is not one, but two streams of connected consciousness, considering that the uppermost realm, Muspelheim, which is fire, and the lowermost realm, Niflheim, which is ice, are polar opposites. So, the representation of that is plain as day, that there's two opposing forces. There is, which is basically what the Bible says. There is God, which everything that is godly, and essentially everything does come from God, but he separated it. Everything that was not of God, he essentially locked away in the Garden of Eden with the tree of the forbidden fruit and knowledge of good and evil, right? So this is basically what the Yggdrasil is also representing. So there was a consciousness from above, which is interpreted as the consciousness that God created Adam and Eve with, and the consciousness from below, which was the forbidden knowledge that was shed in fruit form before it reached the upper heights of the tree. Adam and Eve ate of this fruit and forever connected mankind to the dark ether or lower state of consciousness. In other words, the sin nature, right? So I also believe, now I'm going to go ahead and get into some more gravy on this. I'm going to go ahead. Oh, no, you're good. You're good. All good, Nick. I'm also going to go ahead and get into this aspect of train of thought. It just doesn't stop there. And Jason, I already know that you know pretty much almost everything what I'm talking about here. But to build on top of everything I just spoke of, I believe that this stream of lower consciousness or forbidden knowledge was also the sacred energy source of the elves in Alfheim, right? Because legend goes in Norse mythology that the elves in Alfheim, the light elves, had a secret energy source that they refused to share with any of the other beings. It was specifically just theirs. And again, my research has led me to believe that the legend of Alfheim, the dwelling place of these light elves, is indeed Antarctica. And this is my proof for it. So, I believe that this energy source that I called this dark ether, or the stream of lower consciousness or evil consciousness, forbidden knowledge, was also called the Vril, and its keepers the Vril Ya. Now, according to the legends, the Vril Ya were allegedly giant-like, luminous, and beautiful humans, right? That is the exact description of the light elves in Norse mythology. So, this may shed light on the alleged discoveries of the Nazis in the land of Antarctica back in the 40s, where they made contact with these beings, and they actually even sought out these beings too, because of this secret energy source, or this secret stream of forbidden knowledge, right? So it was said, according to these legends, that the Nazis made contact and met the king of the earth. This king of the earth that they described matches up identically to the god of Alfheim, Freyr, who was a fertility god that granted prosperity and peace and was known for his giant erect penis. Which, again, that aspect of it correlates to Nimrod, Jason. It correlates to Nimrod. The phallus, and how we always see that symbology, and it pops up everywhere. We have the obelisk in multiple places here in the United States, and it's also in, the Vatican and a few other spots. But again, it literally all connects. But essentially, that's the end of my little gravy train there. That comes to the how the legends of the elves connects to the Nazis and supposedly allegedly what they were doing over there, and it also connects to pops up. Oh wow, I didn't. Yeah, good catch on that one. But yeah, so essentially that's the end of my gravy train, to all of that. Is there any questions from anyone in the audience that wants me to go over some of the information that that you may have missed? There was a whole bunch of gravy in this that you guys would probably would like to know, just for knowledge sake. But yeah, heavy stuff that I got into. So what I will do right now, since I've got more people in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick recap, just very briefly, over what I had said in the earlier part of the stream. So I was doing connecting the parallels of the Norse mythology and Ragnarok to the biblical end times found in Revelation. So I'll go and do a recap of this. So Norse mythology basically says that the sun and the moon are going to go dark, and they're symbolically represented as being devoured by these wolves, which are like doomsday clocks or an appointed time, right? The Norse Ragnarok story also states that the stars are going to fall, the dome is going to be split, and that the Yggdrasil, the great tree, will tremble. Essentially, there's going to be a giant earthquake, and this giant earthquake is going to shake the firmament. It's going to cause the stars to fall. It's going to cause mountains to fall, tsunamis to displace islands and everything, right? Well, let's go and begin reading in the book of Revelation here. Keep in mind, again, according to the Norse, the sun and the moon are going to be devoured and begin to go dark. So there's multiple phases of darkness that the sun and moon are going to go through. There's going to be a massive earthquake. It's going to shake stuff. Stars are going to fall. Mountains are going to collapse. Insane stuff. So Revelation chapter 6, verses 12 through 14. And I beheld when he opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. And the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, and even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Revelation 8, verse 12. And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, and so as the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. Revelation 11:13. In the same hour there was a great earthquake, 10th part of the city fell, and the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted, and gave glory to the God of heaven. Revelation 16, verses 18 through 21. There were voices, thunders, and lightnings, and I heard a great earthquake, such was not since men were upon the earth. So mighty an earthquake and so great. And the great city was divided into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And the great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. And and there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent, and men blasphemed God because the plague of the hail, for the plague thereof was exceedingly great. So, again, what I had said before in the stream is that it should come to no surprise that there's so many parallels between Norse Ragnarok and the book of Revelation, because the book of Revelation was written at least 500 years before Ragnarok was even a thought. So this all kind of pays homage to the glory of God and the prophecies of the great and fearful day of the Lord, where he will take vengeance upon the earth and avenge those that were slain for keeping the worship of him and the testimony of Jesus Christ. But it just goes to show that's how great the word of God is, that even the pagans and the heathens began to change their theology just because of it. Because at the end of Ragnarok, all the gods die. These gods that the Norsemen and the Northern Germanics worshipped and loved so deeply, they all get wiped out. So they're not all powerful or anything like that, and they're not even really immortal. If you die, you're not immortal. Obviously, I shouldn't have to say that, but now not only is the day of the Lord foretold in the book of Revelation, but it's also mentioned all throughout the Old Testament. And I'll go and read some of those verses here. In Isaiah 34, verse 4, "And all the hosts of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll, and all their hosts shall fall down. As the leaf falleth off from the vine, as a falling fig from the fig tree." Joel chapter 2, verse 10, "The earth shall quake before them, the heavens shall tremble, the sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining." Joel chapter 3, verses 15 through 16, "The sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. The Lord shall also roar out of Zion, and utter his voice unto Jerusalem, and the heavens of the earth shall shake. But the Lord will be the hope of his people, and the strength of the children of Israel." Matthew 24:29, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken." Acts chapter 2, verse 19 through 20, "And I will shew wonders in heaven above, and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and notable day of the Lord to come." So, a lot of Bible verses here about a lot of Bible verses here talking about the great and fearful day of the Lord that has been talked about for at least 2,500 years, almost 3,000. So why do you think the similarities exist? Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Jason, that they were, I think it was more of the fact that they had heard about the great and fearful day of the Lord, and the fact that it resonated with them to the point where they were even able to admit that our gods are going to die. There is not going to be any safe haven for anyone during these days. And the thing is that the Norse kind of get it right of who does it. You know, it's the elemental realm of Muspelheim in which destroys the earth, which is like we'll read here. So, for the newbies walking up into the chat, I'm going to go ahead and. So, anyways, for the guys that are just walking in now, I'll read from right here. The dome of the sky will be. This is the Ragnarok, right? "The dome of the sky will be split, and from the crack shall emerge the fire giants from Muspelheim." So this is the end for the gods of Norse mythology. The elemental realm of Muspelheim, which is a place of fire, is for us Christians. We would see that this is God. For as we see in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 29, "For our God is a consuming fire." Exodus chapter 13, verse 21 describes God as a pillar of fire to lead the Jews by night. Exodus chapter 19, verse 18, "Mount Sinai was altogether on smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly." And again, just in general, a lot of the sites in heaven are represented as fire. Like in Revelation 4:5, out of the throne proceeded lightnings and thunderings and voices, and there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. Revelation 15:2, "And I saw as were a sea of glass mingled with fire, and them had gotten the victory over the beast, and over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass, having the harps of God." Another thing to note too is that when the Norse say that the fire giants will emerge from Muspelheim, from the crack in the dome, the giants of Muspelheim are the angels of the Bible. Okay, symbolically, what I'm representing here. So let's see here. Yes. Okay. So in the Ragnarok story, some of the giants, like the fire giant Sur, he carries a flaming sword. And as we see in Genesis chapter 3, verse 24, "So he drove out the man, and he placed in the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims, and a flaming sword which turned every way, to keep the way of the tree of life." So we see that flaming sword, cherubim, angels are kind of, they can pop up. They don't always pop up together, but they can. But from Ragnarok, I'm going to read from right here. "Their leader shall be served with a flaming sword brighter than the sun in his hand. As he marches across the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge to Asgard, the home of the gods, the bridge will break and fall behind him. An ominous horn will blast will ring out, and ring out, This will be Heimdall, the divine sentry blowing the Gjallarhorn to announce the arrival of the moment the gods have feared. This is the death of the gods, essentially. A couple things I want to point out that I didn't do the first time. Bifrost, okay? The Bifrost Bridge, the Rainbow Bridge. I think that's a symbolic representation of the light spectrum. And in other words, that there is another realm beyond our vision of sight that exists. And I think the Bifrost is the symbolic representation of that there is another realm in which the gods that they worshipped, which would be the angels of the satanic rebellion, dwell, or where the armies of the satanic rebellion dwell. They're beyond our sight. They are in a different dimension. So, and then also the blowing of the horn. That's going to be the seventh trump, or one of the trumps. I think it's the seventh trump. It's obviously, I don't even know why. It's obviously going to be the seventh trump that this one is referring to, because that is when the wrath of God is poured out and the death of the gods is imminent. In other words, the gods being Lucifer, the Satans, because there isn't just one Satan. There's multiple. Satan itself is just a title, the adversary. But then at the very last part, the gods will decide to go to battle, even though that they know what the prophecies have foretold concerning the outcome of this clash. They will arm themselves and meet their enemies on a battlefield called Vigrid, which in Old Norse means the plain where battle surges. Well, let's go ahead and go to Revelation chapter 16, verse 8 through 21, because this is 8 through 16. That battlefield where the plain where battle surges, that is the Valley of Megiddo, where the Battle of Armageddon takes place, and we're going to read that right here. Revelation chapter 16, verses 8 through 16. And the fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun, and the power was given unto him to scorch men with fire. And the men were scourged with great heat, and then blasphemed the name of God, which hath power over the plagues. And they repented not to give him glory. And the fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, and the kingdom was full of darkness. They gnawed their tongues for pain, and blasphemed against the God of heaven, because their pains and their sores, and repented not of their deeds. And the sixth angel poured out his vial of the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And I saw the three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirit of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to battle of the great day of God Almighty. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked, and they see his shame. And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon, which is the Valley of Megiddo. Part of the other reason why I included all those extra passages in there is that according to Norse Ragnarok, let me go back to the live chat here. In Norse Ragnarok, is that the fire giants that come from Muspelheim, that come from the dome above, they are also tasked with destroying the world with fire. And as we saw right there, and also in Revelation 8 verses 5 through 9, the angels of God will also send fire upon the earth to destroy it. So reading that in Revelation 8 verses 5 through 9, and the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth, and there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. And the seven angels, which had the seven trumpets, prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and there were followed hail mingled with fire and blood, and they were cast upon the earth. And the third part of the trees was burnt up, and all the green grass was burnt up. And the second angel sounded, and as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. And the third part of the sea became blood. And the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. So again, it's a lot of really amazing parallels. It's obvious that this is a bootleg of Revelation. I do think it's amazing that that such a heathenistic warrior tribe, such as the Vikings, would even include this in their beliefs. It kind of, to me, it kind of undermines the entire reason why they would even worship those gods in the first place. But that kind of adds to the fact of how the Vikings transitioned and converted to Christianity. A lot of people don't know that, but there was a lot of major success of Vikings converting to Christianity, which explains some of the very tribal holy war battles of the Celts and Irish way back when we had some of the Protestant Reformation. I think a lot of that warrior mentality is ingrained in DNA, and it gets passed down through generation to generation. But a lot of amazing stuff that I found while studying this. But because initially when I was looking at Norse mythology, I kind of questioned how is it that the Vikings transitioned to Christianity, because they were such a barbaric tribe. And then when I read Ragnarok, I was like, oh, that's why they converted. they know that their gods are going to get wrecked by the eternal fire, which is God, the consuming fire. It was just mind blowing to me. But I figured I'd share some of my studies and give a good report of what I had found. So, yeah. Anyways, that is all I have for this cast, guys. Is there any questions? Anyone want to tune in, chime in? I know Jason's been keeping us busy. Keeping us busy with his 2 cents, which has been awesome. But if not, I guess I'll go ahead and put an end to this live stream. I appreciate everyone coming out here. This was my first ever solo live stream. I think it went pretty successful. You know, we've had about 10 people almost the entire time throughout this stream, so that's a success for me. But I appreciate you guys for coming here. You guys all have a great one, and I'm going to go ahead and close this out here with my right here. Right? What? Oh, okay. Bye, guys.